There, it's Dr. Judith Briles, and welcome to another episode of AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. And as always, we love to thank our sponsors who make it possible that we can go commercial free. And so that would be Nick Zellinger of nzgraphics.com. That's N Nancy Z Zebra graphics.com, who is a multi-award winning book designer, interior, and also all the swag that accompanies authors when they're in bookstores, events, and any gadgets out there. And also Rebecca Finkel of FTGD. So I feel pretty good day, like that. .com and Rebecca is also an multi-award winning. Both of these people have worked with me for years. We're talking years and years, designing my own books and also my clients' books. I know there was a big celebration we just did for Nick, and we had hundreds of books. Over 20 years of working together, we have done hundreds of books in designing. So it was fun to get all those covers to make this amazing scene for him with that. And then the bookshepherd.com is me, that I do with my consulting, working with people like you. And then AuthorU-Your, which is a membership organization for authors who really want to be seriously successful with their books, their publishing empire to be, with that said. All right, as always, I like to start with a quote from my book, Snappy. I always like the cover, show it. Snappy, Sassy, Salty Success for Authors and Writers. And that I think that I'll just be, oh, here's this one. The secret sauce to speaking success is action. The essential driver of action will be your persistence and your perseverance. All right. Now, I do know quite a bit about speaking. I was on the platform out there for over 40 years. I spoke in all 50 states and 20 countries. I've had interpreters interpreting my words into another language, like over me. I could hear them. That was unusual as they did that on that. But it's speaking is really great. Now, the book I'm going to recommend to all of you would be this: How to Create a $1,000,000 Speech. All right, that's my book, How to Create a $1,000,000 Speech, and I did it. All right, so my speaking career has led me, as I said, to every state in the country, as well as 20 nations. My books have sold have foreign rights in 17 countries, which is kind of cool too. But the question is, so why should you speak? Why should you speak? And it's really a good question to ask yourself. So how about this? How about changing lives? How about HAPS fun? How to amass huge book sales with there? How to make money? How to go places you never thought you would go? All of those things can add into why speak. All right, that. So what you want to do though is there's some tricks to the trade. Number one, you want to get good. That would be a good idea. And the more you speak, you know what? The better you're going to get. I promise you, you will. Will you have flubs? Yeah. Will you have times when you feel like the angels have descended? Oh, yeah. It's so magical when that happens. Will you have times where you know that there are one or two people that absolutely here to hear you because they're desperate for your words, because your words matter. I mean, your words matter. Right. So with this, you want to learn how to pitch your topic to a decision maker and how to find that decision maker. You want to, should you ever speak for free? Oh, yeah, of course. But I had strings attached when I would do that. One, I had to really care about the group. And there's a lot of groups I care about, their own themes, their things they're doing. Absolutely, I want to support that on that. Or I had to feel that if I was going to reduce my speaking fee, that there very well could be someone in that audience could actually hire me my full fee. Right. So I had to go through that. I did it. I do about 10 freebies a year. I'm still out there speaking after all these years, out there, and it was the number one. Speaking is the number one thing that will sell your books. Getting out there and how to connect with people on that because then they want to take you home. And there are do's and don'ts in speaking. Like do not be a swooper. What's a swooper, you're saying? Okay. A swooper is someone who comes into a conference, a facility, wherever they are, and would be a live presentation, in person, and they do their presentation, and they're great. They could be great, or they could be so-so. I don't know, but they could be great. But they take the money and split. Don't swoop in, because you'll find that when you hang out and you're around people, that there is going to be someone that says, we have a group, that I think you'd be an ideal speaker for. And then you're going to say, well, I would be honored to reach out to them. Who are they? Get names, numbers, or theirs that you can follow up with. It's always important to do that. And if that's your tracking, we're back to marketing on that. You want to learn tips to create a buzz factor. You want to know how to structure a speech. There's a difference between keynotes and workshops, so to speak. They could go longer. How to open, how to close, and the elements you need on your website for speaking. So I think I'm going to start there. Let's talk about what you need on your website. So first of all, I want you to have a tab that says website. It's going to say, your tab will say speaking. All right. So you're going to have a speaking tab on your website, and that in it, you're going to have pictures of you that look like you today. I've got wrinkles now. I didn't used to 20 years ago. That's being on the road. And I typically when I was, really out there, I was gone at least 150 days a year, on that, speaking to different groups. And you get smarter. You try to cluster some of these together so you're not, because I was living on airplanes all the time. I was sick a lot. To this day, after COVID came along, I do not get on an airplane without a mask that I would wear normally in the hospital. I don't do that, and I don't get sick anymore. I don't, because people coughing, sneezing, I don't get their bugs, which works for me. I literally had times when they would take me into the ER. They would spray and numb my throat because I just chronic bronchitis all the time from bugs I would catch. And I'd do my presentation and then I'm gone again. But that's that's one of the things of being on the road all the time. It's tough. It's tough on your body. So with that, we're looking at your website. So I want a picture that looks like you. A couple of pictures, and do color and black and white as well. Why do you want these things? Number one, if they hire you, it's a source that they'll go to get a headshot to include in the program that they will put out with you on it. And trust me, they do. So you want to have something that looks like you. I like to have introductions. On my website, I have a short and a longer one, but short that they can do, and I do it in a big font. It's like a 14, at least a 14 font, and a line and a half. And not only do they can download it, and I'll send it to them beforehand, I carry it with me because, and if you have an unusual name, do it, how to pronounce your name, help them. Johnson's real easy. Smith's real easy, but boy, there's some real tongue twister names. Help them out in that. I found that a lot of times I would say something, if I'm adding things that I need to add cred for, I might say Judith appeared in a variety of media, including Oprah, Good Morning America, The Wall Street Journal, CNN. She's even survived the National Enquirer. Okay, so I've gone through that. So they're saying, oh, maybe we should pay attention to her on that. I might have a line in an introduction. that says she's spoken, and there's absolutely a purpose to do that. She's spoken to the tank division of the U.S. Army. She's spoken to the operating room nurses, keynoted the operating room nurses, and she's even presented to the 8th grade class of Smith Elementary School. Something like that in there. So that shows that number one, I'm diverse. I can handle different audiences, different ages, different genders. All right. So if that's in your skill set, you want to do that opening your introduction. That when I was hired for a gig, I always would ask, do you have a special scholarship fund or a foundation? Are you supporting any cause? Because I'd like to support that too. And they would say, so how would you do that? Well, I said, well, I will bring books with me, and if people buy books, I'll donate a percentage back to you once we process any credit cards or anything like that. And I always did. Now, here's the subtle thing here. I never said from the platform to buy my book. Never, never. But when you're supporting their causes and stuff, it was typical for my introducer to say, Judith's going to be here all day. I was never a swooper. I was always there. Usually the day before, if it was a multi-day conference, so I could absorb, meet people. But that she will, go talk with her and ask your questions or ask for her help. She'll be here all day at her book table, and she is donating a percentage of sales to our scholarship foundation. Okay, that always goes over big. I don't have to ask people to go. All right. Another technique I had, and I'm bypassing off of the website, but when I was speaking, I always carried my book with me. All right. I always carried the book with me. And like for my confidence fact, my book called The Confidence Factor, that one of my tips, I had 10 steps to rebuilding your confidence. That one of them was to, remove negativity, reduce negativity, something along those lines. And I would always just open my book and I would say, I've interviewed over 10,000 people during my career. And it doesn't matter where I open it to, they just see me opening the book. And I would say, one of the most fascinating persons I've ever interviewed was this person who I named her name. And then, and let me share a few lines from my interview. Now, I know her story inside and out. I mean, I did write it up. It's in my book. I do write my books. And I know that story. And I do it, and I would look down like I'm reading it and I'm going through the story. By the time I'm done with this heart-wrenching, amazing story about this woman, they want the book. I don't have to sell with my mouth verbally, go buy my book. I told them the insides and they can get it that way. I hope that makes sense to you. It's got much more finesse to it. Most people don't want to come across as a brazen salesperson. So that was my method. I pass it to you and to use to take with you. All right, back to the website. So pictures on that, a short introduction on that. On that. I would have on there, if you collect the logos of other groups that you've already spoken for, and I would include them in there as a possibility on there. I would have a description, like I have on my website, Judith's top 12 speeches that she gives. Now, this is very important because I'm also going to tell you this. In the back of your book, any book you have, if it's fiction, tell me, promise me that you have, or now you're going to add, if you're on KDP or Ingram Spark, your book designer can add in another page or two to the back of your book. How to bring Judith to your group. Of course, your name. Okay. And the lead-in would be, that Judith speaks on a variety of topics based on her 48 books. And just you could recite them. Below are 4 of the most requested topics, or I give them a dozen, but below what they are. Now, what I want you to do, if it's tied into any of your books, I would have the book cover in there, you know, even if it's the book cover is related to the book they're reading in, doesn't matter. I would have it, this is the genesis of it. And I would have like a 2, maximum 3 sentence description of what the speech is about. Now, why is that important? Because I can tell you they're going to copy paste it and goes into the programs, the conference program book. I would have anywhere from 3 to 5 audience takeaways. Now, I learned to do that because I did 20 years working just in healthcare. People were getting continuing education units, and I had to use the vocabulary. Participants will learn 4 ways. They will, and they will understand how to, that kind of stuff, that we'd have in that. And I would do it for each one of them, 3 to 5 bullets. So 2 to 3 sentences of what it is, have your title, whatever your book title is, I would have that as one of your speech. Then there's variations of things, as you go through of what you can talk about it, included in your book. At the bottom of that page, who to contact to book you on that. Whether that I would give an email, even a phone number. I know websites, people are antsy. If you're trying to speak, you better be easy to get a hold of, easy contact to get a hold of. I have at the top of the banner on my website, let's talk, and my phone number. Call me or email me. Right on, very blatantly on my website in a couple of places for how to work with me. It belongs there for sure on that. For those of you who are fiction authors and want to get out there and do some speaking, like book clubs and stuff, so I want you to create and questions for discussions. And by the way, you should have in your nonfiction books questions for discussion too, because there's a lot of book clubs that read fiction and nonfiction. They're not one type of pony on that. So discussion questions that would be brought up, that would be topical, that would be interesting. You do not have to answer them. And I know for my fiction books, I have a lead discussion question, and then I have maybe a couple of subs underneath it that would tie directly into it. But I try to do at least 10 questions to do. And book clubs are very popular. So you want to take it, and I would, just put some energy in to finding, and we'll come back and finding places to go to on that. So we're talking your website. So you're going to have discussion questions. You're going to have descriptions of speeches that you can give, how to get a hold of you. You want to have intro on it. I even have on mine how I like a room set up. I like to have a room that has kind of a little bit of a curve, or it could be angled on that. What I don't want, and I can use it this way. So what I don't want is I don't want a room that has a giant bowling alley down it. It pulls your energy away from it. So, and I do the curve around so we come included. So what I do in that back row, maybe the back 2 rows, I would, if it's not a fixed auditorium, you're out of luck here on that. But when they're setting up, whether it's chairs or tables and chairs, and a lot of times I do workshops. So we have tables, they're working on computers, they're doing that kind of stuff. But the last 2 rows, I will do it in a third. So I'll do a third, a straight, and then over here, so that then it blocks the energy suck that's going down. Now I move around a lot when I'm down on the floor and doing that, because I just find that works for me. You all will find your areas. I don't stand. I've never, I do everything I can to avoid a lectern. I will move from side to side if there's, it's there. You have nothing to do, but that's where it's at. So, and I give tips, and I also always offer, if someone wants me to do a presentation, And I will say, do you have a newsletter? Do you have a magazine? Would you like me to supply an article for you on that? I've even made sense to say, would you like me to do a Zoom meeting or a webinar on our topic? And you can invite your people, because if you're trying to get people to sign up, I'd like to help you get people to sign up that doing that. So I do everything I can to have it a win-win for the meeting planner as well as me and for the participants in that. So websites, you need to have that. Now I would try to, if you can do balloons or stuff, you want to have accolades and from both meeting planners and as they come along, meeting planners and participants. You know, that you want to, if you, I remember one I used for years. I did a keynote for the Texas Library Association, and we had so much fun. We had so much fun. And that the meeting planner, he said, he wrote, he said, you had our members rolling in the aisle laughing, right? So I don't put I'm a humorous speaker, but I do use humor. But that also lets another person, and my topics were serious. That, we can be serious, but we can have fun. And I think that's what you want to do in that. So the question is, how do we structure a speech? That's a good one. Okay, so let's just start right with that. If you're a nonfiction writer, you've got a table of contents that could be your structure. Those are your most likely key points in there. So in my little book here, I have crafting. Chapter 18 is all about crafting a speech on that. And there is you have to start with, what is your talk about? And what's your objective on that? So you can come in and you introduce this. So the layout is pretty simple in building a speech. And a workshop is just expanded of that. But now you're going to be bringing in activities and things to engage them. And that, so you want to set the message. So your opening story, you can open with stories, facts, amazing statistics. I remember I was speaking to a group. I had written, I think I could disclose several finance books. That's my first book was called The Woman's Guide to Financial Savvy. I was a stockbroker before women were not the norm, stockbroker in that. So I just lost my light. Let's try it again and see what happened here. Okay, there we go. And they were not the norm. So I was the oddball out in that. And that I was speaking at a large conference. It was 5,000 and up in Vancouver. And that the markets were crashing. The mortgage markets were, oh my God, can you remember back to 208, 209? That foreclosures it was a horrible time. And USA Today, and when I'm traveling, I always make sure I have a USA Today plus the local newspaper. And that's just a tip for you. You need to know what's going on locally. Absolutely essential. What is going on locally? And so front page USA Today as well as the local paper. So when I walked out on the stage, I opened the paper and I held it like a billboard in front of me as they am introducing, and I'm walking forward, to take the mic, and I'm just showing those. And I just said, "Good afternoon. This is what we're talking about today." Right. Normally, I start with a story. And I have a variety of different stories I use for different speeches. I had gosh, it was an awful situation that happened to me many, many years ago in Seattle. And I developed a whole story to support the incident. I mean, the story happened, but it just didn't happen with the incident. And the story involved a situation when I had, oh, I can't, I guess I turned 40. I guess I turned 40 at the time. And I had two daughters in their, you know, late teens, early, no, they're early 21 to 24. And I was someone who had three kids by the time I was 20. And that took me out to lunch for my birthday and they said to me something like this, Mom, you have to do something about your face. You're getting really old. Right. So they go through all these different things. All right. So my audience was women, and we're going through all these different things. And then I ended up heading to Seattle, for this. So I opened it up with my daughter's telling me I need to do this. I'm speaking in Seattle. So I'm actually connecting with my audience. They have kids, they have daughters, telling their mothers what to do. And I was picked up at the airport by a driver who dropped me at the hotel and then picked me up the next morning and took me to the site where I was going to be speaking. So, but I had packed and I had, this is the days when pantyhose were the no. I had packed and it turned out I had an abnormal pair of pantyhose and they weren't going to fit. But of course, I had to wear them. And so I reversed the order and I put them on, went off and got out of the car and my underwear fell off, literally down to the ground. So I eventually, I mean, it was a horrible experience. It was a horrible experience. And, what did you do? But I developed a story, what I do, how I handled it, and I had a closing line because when you roller coaster a story and do it, you've always got to leave that out. So you're up on high instead of, oh my God, the world's coming to an end on that. And I had the same driver. In fact, he asked to he asked to come back the next day to take me back after my speech that day. And my closing line was something like, he asked me how'd it go, and I said to him, well, it went good. I have never been so liberated in all my speaking. And the audience would roar with the whole thing. So it was, but truth be told, I didn't go back to Seattle for 5 years because I truly believe someone had seen me lose my underwear, step over them, and leave them and just haul into where I was going. 5 years later, I started getting more comfortable with it. I worked on choreographing. And by the way, choreographing your stories is a smart thing to do. Have someone who's good with storytelling to help you with punchlines and that they come out. And I headed to, I was down signing books and things, and this woman came up to me and she said, I remember, I remember hearing and seeing you in Seattle years ago. You were in Seattle, right? And I said, I was. And and I was outed, and I told the story, and I was outed on that. And then I used it for every women's group forward. That was the opening story. People would ask for me to do it again, even though they had heard it several times on it. That's the power of a story, but that's your opening. How are you going to open it? On it. When I talked about conflict resolution, I had an experience, and use your own stories. You don't need to use other people's stories. I had a situation years ago when my kids were little and we were in Las Vegas, and there was only one place in Las Vegas during this time that you could go with the family, and it was called Circus Circus, and that was a zoo, not only a circus. And it was crazy, and I was so overwhelmed with everything going on, the noise, the whistles, the bells, the colors, and critters. I ran into the butt of an elephant. Literally, they had an elephant, a young elephant in the zoo, in the lobby. And knowing that magic is in circus, Vegas. So I backed up, think, hit it again. It was right. So wholly embarrassed and all that. But years ago, when I had my first book dealing with betrayal and sabotage and toxic workplaces, that I resurfaced that story and I would tell the story and I would bang them up to ran into the butt of the elephant and doing all those things. Um, and and people were wondering, where is she going with this thing? And I said, some of the people that you have to manage, that you have to lead, you have to work with are equivalent to running into the butt end of an elephant. They got it. So you could have stories that you can evolve and develop that happened to you when you were in kindergarten. Doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter where you are in that process. It doesn't matter on that. So have a story that opens with you. It could be awesome statistics. It could be involve some research you did. It could be involve a personal situation. Like, I would share stuff about screw ups that I did all the time. But connect it so then you can lead into it. So that opening and it sets the message. And I told about the confidence when I did it for the confidence factor, how I would loop losing my underwear back to, because I did, you know, like my self-esteem was in the pit, not wanting to go back because I believed that I was going to be on the nightly news. I believed that people were going to write about me. And then here we are 5 years later, a woman saw me do it. And I told another story about how one time I was in New England and Frank was my driver that was taking me to the site where I'd be speaking. And I told Frank about what happened on that. And I said, Frank, what would you have done in his slow, not slowness, but his thinking, noodling over, his hesitation? He said, well, I think I would have picked them up and saved them for you. And I said, and then I would say, sometimes you have to leave your mistakes on the sidewalk of life and step over and keep on going and rebuild your confidence. So I could loop it back in and bring it around. So open it up to set the stage with your message. The next thing, you've got all these points of wisdom that you're going to elevate it as you go through the creation of your speech. So I usually typically would plan for, it depends on how many points of wisdom. If I had 10, I don't have a lot of time here. I've got just a couple of minutes to support it. If I was doing a keynote, I probably would identify what my 10 points were, and then I would say, I'm going to come back and refocus on these three, and we're going to go into depth with them. So I would do it that way. So what's the point? What's the story or the example or the suggestion or the advice that you're going to give to support it? All right. I would repeat my key point, and then I would move it to the next point on that. And that is your basic formula. Now, you could have activities. I've had people get up and change their clothes around and do weird things in the audience. I've had people, I had an exercise where I talked about, it was tying in with confidence of being true to yourself, which was always my first point on it. How are you true to yourself? And I have people, they had a blank piece of paper. They're all given like a plane. I tell them to rip it up in 4 pieces on each piece of paper. Just write a word or 2 words of what is absolutely essential to you right now. What's really important to you on that. And they'd go through it and they do that. They said, this is now, we're in full audience participation. They're all doing it. They're all writing it. Right. So I said, okay, look at these. And I would have them open up their hand, like a little hand of cards. And I say, of these 4 really important things to you right now, which is the least important? And I'd hear groans. Literally hear groans. What was the least important? And then, and they say, I want you just to remove it from your hand. You can drop it on the floor, you can put it in your lap. I don't care what you do with it, I want to remove it. If someone, and then, there was some hesitation. And if someone was having a problem with doing that, I would say, okay. And I'd just go down into the audience and I'd go over to that person and I'd reach over and pull one out and crumble it up, put it in my pocket. And there's like, oh, she told me she did. Right now, you have 3 really important things. Of the 3, which is the least important? It's now they're thinking, I don't want her to come take one on one. I'll do it. And it got easier. And we get to 2. Of the 2, which is the less important. Right? They'd get rid of it. And that was the easiest one to deal with. So it didn't matter. It could be family, it could be my health, it could be going back to school, You know, could be getting a divorce, it could be getting married, who having a baby, who knows? They could fake, who knows? But it's theirs. And I never had them share anything with anyone. This is personal. They keep this is, and they were told, you're not going to, and no one else is going to see this. This is for your eyes only. Do it. So the question then, here's my question. How many of you spend the amount of time you want to each day on that? If I got 10% from my audience, that was big. So then I had a poster that went up because I use slides. Poster, slide came up, you know, if you never say no, your yeses are worthless. We have to say no on that. So that was a key point. Don't do well what you have no business doing. Key point in that talk. Going on, being true to yourself. So structuring your speech, it's not difficult. It's getting, for nonfiction, it's your chapters, your key chapters, your key points. It's right there. You've already done that work. So what are you doing to illustrate it and share and sell and then bring it out, bringing it alive to an audience? For a fiction author, you may be talking about a variety of things, but you may be doing, you could do act outs from your book, have people become part of your book and doing it, or they want you to do elements of what brings you to the party. How did you? I always tell people I was a reluctant author. I never intended to write a book. My the only hint to do hints for speaking and writing was I got in trouble because I always passed notes when I was in school. And number two was I always spoke out and I talked too much. Who would know that that was going to lead to my ultimate profession, speaking and writing? But I still didn't know about the writing, how it was going to come together. I mean, I wrote articles, I did that to support my businesses, but it wasn't until a well-known author took some of my ideas after I met him, had dinner with him when he was speaking at an event that I was president of, and he took them and published them and never gave me credit. And that's when the epiphany dropped in that if I didn't start taking some of my ideas, other people would. So you need to think about that for yourself. So for the fiction author, you know, they're going to want to know what brought you to the party. How did you go about doing it? How do you keep your mojo going? Where do your ideas come from? They love to have you sometimes just read a little bit from your book on those things. So there's just different varieties, but the structure of your talk, that's not the hard part. It's getting the elements to come together and now start doing the glue to bring it about. In my book, How to Create $1 Million Speech, I have a very important chapter that you want to know about and get to. And I'm going to get to that here in just a sec. But you also want to know about your closing, which is very important. And also, do you handle Q&A questions? Because some media planners, well, yeah, we want you to do your Q&A. I don't like Q&As, not from a platform speaking. Workshops, I take questions all the time during a workshop. When I'm doing a Zoom workshop or if you've got a question, let's get them out right now. If I'm going to come to it later, I will tell you. I will be coming to it later. No big deal. But I'd rather address it. In a keynote, it's kind of a seamless thing you're doing here, and you're bringing it about. So if you've got how you structure your speech, whatever your last point is, your last sharing in your speech, I would stop there and say, I promised our meeting planner or Grace or whatever her name is, that I'd leave a little bit of room for questions and answers. So before I finish my presentation, let's open it up with some questions. Now, what I found is everyone's waiting for the other person to write a question. I would go ahead and lead it yourself. And I would say something like this. I had an opportunity to speak to a lot of you before we started, and a lot of you asked the same question. So I'm going to open it up with that. And I would give the question and then respond back. And it's kind of let the air out a little bit. and they can come and give it to you. Other questions will come across, and just take a few. And I would say, okay, I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. Come back to where I'm at my book table and ask away. I mean, and I would do strategy. I mean, I would do real planning with people. I would end up doing a script for someone how to confront another person she was having a problem with in the workplace, because that was my expertise at that time. So you can do it. All right. And then bring it back to your grand close. So you back in the area. And do that. Now for your closing, remember this. You can leave them laughing, you can leave them crying, or you can leave them thinking, but don't just leave them. All right. Laughing, crying, thinking, but don't just leave them in the process. And just thank them. You know, when I'm done, I would do my close. I would just say, thank you for being with me today. And I would step back and turn it over to whoever I'm supposed to turn it over to at that time. Now, another thing in speaking, which you want to be tuned into, is to be aware that sometimes there are things, elements that go on you cannot control. Um, the biggest complaints about every conference I spoke at, and I don't know how many gazillions, hundreds of them I did. It's the food and the heat or the cold on that. You can't control it, so just acknowledge it on that. You know, and I remember one time I was speaking in Kansas City, and I was speaking to a whole bunch of other speakers that worked for this one company. It was they did, workshops all over the country. I can't remember the name of them. But Ken Blanchard was the other speaker. We were the two speakers. And we were in this very ornate hotel. I mean, it was beautiful, beautiful hotel. We were in this ballroom that had this huge curtain, heavy, that burgundy velvet curtain on that. And Ken was before me, and I was the second speaker. And he had a fly that kept buzzing around, and I thought, oh my God, no. And we're all watching. We're all watching this. And you wanted to just say slap it or acknowledge it. And he just finished his talk. He was great. But we still remembered the fly. All right, then it was my turn. We had a break and they came back and I was the other morning speaker. And all of a sudden, I feel some movement behind me. And then, like, whoosh, the entire curtain dropped. The entire curtain dropped. And everyone's, what's she going to do? What's she going to say? And I looked around and then I just came full center and stepped forward. And I said, I swear I did not know that we were in a Holiday Inn. They thought it was hilarious because that's where they mostly spoke. Days Inns, Holiday Inns, Quintas, not high-end resort hotels. So sometimes you just grab the moment, let it go, and move on. Right. Now I mentioned contracts. In chapter 14, it's called, I'll just try to show it to you. Woot. You have a gig, you need a contract, right? Now, what I spent a lot of money with attorneys writing my contract. I'm giving it to you. So this is why you do want this book. I'm giving it to you. There's no reason why you have to spend $1,000 on legal fees having someone draw this up. And I go through the actual in smaller font is what it says, and the bigger regular book font is why this is in here. So I start with what the agreement is, with the day, the date, the time, and how many minutes it's going to be in. The next thing is I tell them what the microphone requirement is. I like a handheld mic. I can do it with it. It's always right here, the projection of it. I can play with it if I want to do. I always request at least a cup of hot water. And you don't want cold water, people. You want hot to keep your throat lubricated. And don't, if you need to take a sip, fine. It's not a problem. I have a clause in there that I have educational materials. So I say how big a table I want. I want a 6-foot table in the main, usually the main registration area, or an exhibitor hall table. And I also have in there, nobody else can sell my books while I'm there or anything by me. Now, money's important. You've got to be able to take money on it. So how are you doing that? I remember times that, God, we came back with so much cash. I believe in reporting your income. I don't slough it there on that. And I always sell my books at full price. The only deals were bundles, and I would have I had a 6-pack of my books, and basically they got a free book when they got the 6-pack, and we sold a gazillion of those. Got it. With a speaking fee, I'm just telling you an aside there. We get a deposit. I did not do a gig without a deposit. No exceptions, period. No exception. 50% down. It's not a confirmed gig unless that deposit's in and the contract comes back signed. And we have it when the due date is in. If it's not received by our authors, it's let go. We include our W-9 form for them. We told them when the other 50% is due on the day I'm there, and that any travel expenses that have not already been covered, they pay for my airfare. And usually they pay for the hotel. They just direct bill that to themselves. But any travel will be billed afterwards. And we have a late fee, and we charge a like $300 late fee for anything that comes in late. 100 because, and you're thinking, oh my God, this sounds like it's a lot. Here's the reality. If you don't get paid your full speaking fee by the time you do your presentation, the odds are you're not going to get paid for at least 45 days. If you've got travel stuff going out and other things going out, you're already past your credit card date to get this stuff paid for. So that's why we pushed it. And I mean, I don't think we've ever had to collect it that way. I'm a believer that you should have handouts. I tell them that I will be sending handouts at least 30 days in front, and they will produce them just as they are. And I want them to be on the seats of everybody before I do my presentation, or they get them in the registration materials. And I have a very distinct area of what a client is responsible to. I always ask, what's the closest airport? And I have, I always I always ask for 2 nights just in case I need it to get to and from what we're doing. Because sometimes you can't get out, you never know. I have a whole area of, where's the venue? What's it like? What's the percentage of people signing it and all that? But you can, my permission, take that. It starts on page, my contract starts on page, what is it? It actually starts on the actual contract on page 135 in my book. But that's the gold. That's a gold thing that you can get to take it and run with. And that makes all the difference in the world. So you have it. So my gift to you on that. Now that I took books with me, you could ship them ahead. I went to United is my primary carrier here, so I was here, and United took me to work. I could carry, when I was flying solo, 2 70-pound boxes with me, and I always wore, I had my uniforms on that. By the way, if you're a repeat speaker to a female group, I'm telling you, they pay attention to earrings. I remember someone say, didn't you wear those earrings on the evaluation? Didn't you wear those earrings here when you were here 5 years ago? Probably not, but I I had a sheet. I created a sheet for every gig, every folder, contact, airport, any confirmation numbers I needed to know. I actually would put down what I wore. So if you go back, repeat, I actually had standard things that I wore. They were platform presentations. So I never had. So I could be packed and out of the house in 5 minutes if I needed to be. So with that, now let's talk about going from free to free to fee. When do you do that? I think you should always have free options in you to take advantage of those you care about, that passion factor, or that you really feel that it's worth your while because there could be someone there that would hire you, I'm all for that on that. But otherwise, this is a business. And it figured for me to go out, it took, in most cases, 3 days. It could be 3 days of my time. Day of travel, the day I'm there, a day to get back home. So we had, and this is in my contract, we had to do this. We had a cancellation, and corporations we find were the cancellations and, getting it to another date, but you may already have bought your tickets. And what if it's tied to another ticket? Like if I was speaking in Atlanta, I may be popping up to Charlotte, South Carolina, and then moving up to Cincinnati, Ohio, all, like, that kind of area. If I have someone cancel, because I bought the tickets, because when you can do them and put them together, usually you can get a better rate. If I have a cancellation and I lose out, do you want to stay there or you want to come home or what do you want to do on that? That you're going to be out days, maybe multiple days. So, because we would try to do what we call a cluster gig. That I would be in, like I remember one time in Iowa, I started at the east side of the state, and I had 4 gigs going across, and we drove from each one um, to get to the next one, and they all got a reduced rate on the fee. They all agreed to share in the airfare. If any one of those things canceled out and I had to rebook the whole thing again, I'm going to be out. So we had a deal that we had to penalize that and bring it into play. So, and we added on an extra fee if that had to be done. And we only had to do that a couple of times in the process in that. So that's where you go in that area as we start to bring it all together in it. And you'll have it that we have that. All right. So the other thing is that you want to, when I was carrying books, my 70-pound box of books probably had the value of the books, those boxes. We had double boxes because we really protected them. We didn't want them to be damaged. That I had a minimum of $2,000 values of retail value of books in each box. And sometimes I sold everything out. Sometimes I carried back just a few that we just would stuff a box up. We'd leave boxes behind. It was not a problem. But that's how we did it. Now, credit cards you need to take. You need to be prepared to take checks. I would make sure you got phone numbers. With those, some people pay cash. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is that when I think of writing, doing a speech, I'm always thinking of this. What's the problem? And by the way, I had a special questionnaire. Oh, I put that on my website too. That the meeting planner, I'd ask them to complete that, including what percent is male, what percent is female in my audience. Are there any topics I need to avoid on that? Is there anything special going on I should be tuned into in those areas? So and I would email that again with them. When I go out, I would email my introduction to whoever's supposed to have it. And I carried everything with me. Contract, everything was always carried with me when I went out. So when I'm thinking about going to my structure, just kind of feeling on the structure, is there a problem? Your topic. Let's say mine was conflict resolution. What's the problem? What's the causation of it? What's the impact? What's the solution of it? So when I was doing all the work in healthcare, one of the things I would always want to know is what the turnover rates were, because then I'd find out very quickly what and I would get their hourly rates. So I could figure out very quickly what it would cost to replace, reorient, and all that. And I've said to many people I work with, why are you keeping this person? Probably because they didn't do the documentation. Why are you keeping this person when, in effect, for the last in 6 months, she's cost you $3 million in people quitting, leaving, rehiring, orientation, all that? I mean, I've had those situations in hospitals I worked with. So once you have your facts, what's the problem, cause, effect, solution, and then you can add that into your structure of your speech. All right, we'll do a wrap here. All right, so creating a speech is the way to make money in the speaking in your book publishing business. It's the number one way. Connecting, they want more of you. They need to be reminded of your key tips. They want to take you home. Number one way to do it. And that's the way you'll move from selling the typical self-published author sells 100 books, usually to what we call low-hanging fruit, friends and family. My goal is to get you to move way beyond it. It's how I sold 1 million books. So if you want to create $1 million speech, this is the book you want to get to support your journey, your quest, and celebrate your success. All right, I'm Judith Briles. I'll be back with you next week for another new episode in the AuthorU, Your Guide to Book Publishing podcast.